Welcome into the WalterPicks Fantasy Football Show, where we'll give you everything you need to know about fantasy football. This episode is going to be all about the Cincinnati Bengals, and this is going to be a packed one because this team is full of fantasy viable guys. So we'll go ahead and kick it off first, starting from the top down. Joe Burrow, last season finished as the quarterback 23 fantasy points per game. The interesting thing here is that this team is insane in passing volume. They were number one out of all NFL teams, but when you look at the stats, they had 652 passing attempts. The second highest team was Jared Goff and the Lions with 539. It just shows you how much sheer volume went to these guys, and we'll get into the wide receivers and what that means for them. But Joe Burrow, we have this season going as the QB5 in WalterPicks. About QB5 all across the board for most draft sites. You'll get him on Sleeper, Underdog, ESPN. The WalterPicks app, and me included, has quarterbacks being drafted a bit lower compared to other sites just because we love the values you can get of other wide receivers and running backs early. But Joe Burrow, again, going as a top 5 quarterback, he's going right outside that top group of the Lamar Jacksons, the Josh Allens, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, and then Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow doesn't have the rushing upside as those top 4 guys, so maybe he is getting drafted a little bit too early in that aspect. I know somebody else on this podcast has an opinion on that we will get to. But then you look at the running backs. We have Chase Brown, who, in my opinion, was always the RB1 from the beginning of the season. Zach Moss started that last year in 2024, but that quickly switched. Chase Brown last season finished as the RB14, despite not really being the starter until week 8, I believe. As a starter from week 8 on to the end of the season until he got injured in week 18, he was averaging 19.6 fantasy points per game. For the entirety of the season, he was at 15.9. So those stats, even considering he was not the RB1, is very impressive. This year, we have him as our RB8 in WalterPicks, a little bit ahead of ADP compared to Sleeper, Underdog, ESPN, going around the top 10 RBs and RB12, RB11. And he finished last season as the RB14. So we have him, and I as well agree with him being a top running back for this year as well. Again, because of the amount of volume and offense that is being generated by this team. Partly might be because the defense isn't great. I can agree with that. But he was on pace to be top 5 in targets for all running backs. I think that's going to continue. Again, we will get into our projections for the season later in the video. And then you look at Zach Moss, who finished as the RB33, 10.2 fantasy points per game. A majority, if not all of this, came from the first few weeks of the season when he was the RB1. We have him outside the top 60 running backs. Most draft sites have him outside the top 70. He was just not efficient last year. He wasn't great, which again is why Chase Brown overtook him in depth chart. He was under 3 yards per carry as a starter, and that's just not going to cut it in the National Football League. But when you look at the wide receivers, again, going back to the sheer passing volume of Joe Burrow, we don't have to spend too much time on Jamar Chase because he's the wide receiver 1, in my opinion, in WalterPicks rankings. And almost every single site's rankings you're going to find, Jamar Chase is the wide receiver 1. He averaged 23.6 fantasy points per game last year, obviously finished as that 1. And these these wide receivers are just running way more routes than any other guy. I believe AJ Brown ran about 25 routes per game, near the lowest. Jamar Chase, miles above. He's almost getting a game and a half worth of football time than these other wide receivers in the NFL because of this volume, and I expect that volume to continue. We look at T. Higgins, another guy that does benefit from this. He was the wide receiver 3 last year. I don't remember the last time you had 2 top 5 fantasy wide receivers on one team, 19.3 fantasy points per game. We have him going as a wide receiver 11. He's going as a wide receiver 14, 13 on most draft sites right now, a bit lower than what he finished at last year, but he still can produce. He was the wide receiver 11 in air yards at 92.7. He had a 26.8% team target share, and he missed 5 games. You finish as a wide receiver 3 and you miss 5 games. That is more or less a green flag for me. You look at Andre Yoshavasi here, 7.3 fantasy points per game last season, finished as the wide receiver 78. There's not much you can do when you have these 2 target hogs on your team. And then you have Mike Gesicki at the tight end position. He was the tight end 19 last year, 17.9 fantasy points per game. And I will call out, we do have him going outside the top 20 tight ends. Most sites do. But his fantasy points per game was significantly lower in the games that T. Higgins was healthy. I will get into that later when we go over if we will draft these guys or not. But I'll start at the top and pass it off to Sam. What do you think about Joe Burrow and his ADP?
Yeah, Joe Burrow is very likely to land on my do not draft list this year. And every year I have guys like this on the do not draft list. Mahomes has been on it in the past. Not guys I feel great, putting on the list. These are guys that are capable of being outlier quarterbacks in any given season. And we just saw it from Joe Burrow. Last season finishes the QB3, 22.5 points per game, only really behind Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson for a lot of the reasons you said. The problem for me is, the rushing. And he's getting drafted so close, even sometimes ahead of the elite rushing tier, that I can't get myself to do that, where you need an outlier touchdown rate season from Joe Burrow. We know he's capable of doing that, but touchdown rate is really high variance season to season. And right now we're projecting a Burrow for a 5.5%, 5.7% touchdown rate this season. Last year was 6.6%. You almost never see quarterbacks at back-to-back seasons over a 6.5% touchdown rate. The year before that, in 2023, was only 4.1%. In 2022 is 5.5%. So we're actually projecting him with a higher touchdown rate than 2 and 3 seasons ago, but much lower than last year, just to show you how wildly this stuff can vary. They also just didn't have a true goal line back. They might have now in Taj Brooks. So yeah, I'm fading Joe Burrow because of the cost, because of the lack of the rushing. A great real QB, but at his cost, right now he's going as QB5, I think, on basically every single platform. Yeah, Underdog and Sleeper have him as QB5. We have him ranked there at QB5, but I won't be pulling the trigger with. I won't be shocked at all if Justin Fields is able to outscore him. He's going 6-7 rounds later, just because of how fantasy points work with the rushing volume. Seth, are you with me here on fading Joe Burrow at his cost?
Yeah, I have to agree, for sure. The time I'm drafting him is when I have, a little bit past ADP. If I have pick 1, I think stacking him up with Ja'Marr Chase in round 5, essentially you got that turn at pick around 48 to 49 in the 12-man league. I don't mind it there, honestly. That really lines up with a lot of Bengals players as well, that first pick slot. So you may end up with Chase Brown as well. And I think that's just a powerful team, like Avery said. They just get a game and a half of fantasy work every single week. But with the ADP 42, he will not be there on Sleeper. So for me, I will not draft him there, especially if I don't have Ja'Marr Chase or T. Higgins. So most likely he's not going to end up on my teams unless I get lucky enough, fingers crossed, I get a first pick in a league somewhere.
The other thing just worth noting really quick, relevant to Joe Burrow, but the whole offense overall, obviously, as we start with the quarterback, this defense is going to be really, really bad again. This is one of the worst, if not the worst defense from last season, which pair that with the passing volume and you have just a fantasy football dreamland. We could definitely be in that world again here this season. They also, though, did very little to improve the offensive line. This was one of the worst offensive lines from last season. Really a very unserious NFL franchise. You have a top 5 quarterback in Joe Burrow. You have 2 elite, arguably top 12 wide receivers, and just putting nothing around them. It's tough to watch as a fan, I'm sure, as a Bengals fan. But for fantasy, this defense is probably going to be really, really bad again. This was one of the defenses that wasn't just bad because of injuries last year, like a lot of the defenses were. They really just lack a lot of talent on that side of the ball. And their best players, I believe, on that side of the ball right now are in contract disputes as well, furthering the non-serious NFL organization here. But yeah, we just wanted to note, there could be some crazy games with the Bengals again, just like we saw last year, because they really didn't do much to upgrade the team.
And a lot of people are worried when we look down at Chase Brown for the running backs because this defense is so bad. People worry about the rushing volume. If they're going to be passing a ton, if they need to be keeping up in these high scoring games, are they really going to play a slower pace? And that is a valid concern until you look at what Chase Brown did in the receiving game. This guy he was again 11% target share. When you isolate the games that he was the starter, it was way higher than that. And with what Sam brought up earlier about the red zone role for the running backs, Chase Brown was the RB 47 in rushing touchdown rate, 3%. That's not very high, which means there's really only up to go from here. He can't get lower than a 3% touchdown rate, especially if he's going to start and continue to be the RB1. With those pass catching ability and the opportunity there, I think Chase Brown himself is a value. He is going decently high, especially in WalterPicks rankings, because we do believe in him. Again, going around just outside the top 10 running backs. Sam, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I disagree with the touchdown rate thing. And Walter agrees with you, by the way. Walter is projecting the touchdown rate here at 3.6%. So some positive regression, like you were just suggesting. I do sort of expect Taj Brooks to be a better goal line back than Chase Brown. So I think that maybe we see a similar touchdown rate, but I don't think the touchdown rate is why you are drafting or fading Chase Brown. It's really the target opportunity and the upside as a receiver. He's clearly the best receiving back on this team. And last year was, I think, a much different environment than he'll be playing in this season, where like down the stretch, he wasn't coming off the field basically at all. I mean, he's seeing, I think, the highest snap rate across the entire NFL, maybe just behind Kyron Williams. Like, they just didn't have an option. They ended up signing, I think, Khalil Herbert. He didn't work out. He barely played at all. And Zach Moss actually, I think, suffered a neck injury. He was out for most of the season. They actually did bring back Samaje Perine this offseason, so that's somewhat notable since he played a receiving role for them in the past. The only sort of scary part about this Chase Brown profile is the team spent a 5th-round pick on him just a couple of years ago. They don't have a huge investment in him, so it's possible we see a pretty big shift from this like every single down role to Perine's mixing in on 3rd downs and taking over some of that pass blocking role. Taj Brooks comes in at the goal line, and then suddenly we're looking at a 50% rush share for Chase Brown instead of the 80% he was consistently at down the stretch last year. We're in the middle there in our projection at 65% to Chase Brown, and then another 25% going to Moss, Perine, and Brooks. But yeah, we have him right at an 11% target share this season, right where he was at last year. I think he has a higher ceiling than even that. And with the pass volume on this team, he's could be the 3rd receiving option on the team after Jamar Chase and T. Higgins on a team that could score a huge amount of points. The thing I'm really struggling with Chase Brown is so far all through this draft season and still right now, I just prefer Breece Hall. And Breece Hall is available every single time Chase Brown is available. So I've been leaning that way more. I trust the historical production we've seen from Breece more. I think the Jets might lead the NFL in rushing. And I think Breece Hall is probably going to get a higher target share than Chase Brown too. A slightly less exciting passing offense, obviously, but potentially just as much volume for Breece in the pass game. That's my only real knock against Chase Brown. It's just I prefer Breece a little bit more, but I think they are in that sort of tier at running back that drops off pretty steep, I think, after Breece Hall in drafts right now. So I'm comfortable clicking on him. He's a guy that I'm trying to get a little bit more of exposure to in best ball. But yeah, in season long, I'm probably going to go Breece Hall there. I'm curious what you guys think on just that comparison, since they're often on the board at the same time when you're on the clock choosing between them. Avery, would you go Chase Brown or Breece Hall?
I'd rather have Chase Brown, but I do agree with you that Breece Hall is being wildly undervalued for what he is. I've seen him go way later than Chase Brown.
Yeah, in some cases he's going a full round later than Chase Brown. So yeah, I agree definitely with that. If that's gonna be the cost difference. What about you, Seth? Would you go Breece or Chase Brown?
I'm also going Chase Brown. I'm drafting him in pretty much every single league because I just see that potential in that Bengals offense. If he is a kind of a lucky year, almost like a James Cook year from last year, he could legitimately be the RB1. Like, he gets some luck around the goal line. He gets some good. It just works. That's a real possibility. And I think that the floor is going to be there with the just pure volume. And that's what I like a little bit better than the Jets team is what Chase Brown is going to get in terms of volume.
Yeah, and it's hard to not like him in our projections with the pass volume projection here and just the reasonable target share we have for him. That's why we're ahead of ADP in the WalterPicks app. Definitely that helps give me confidence to take him as well. And in some drafts too, you might not need to choose between them. You might be able to take both. There's a if you're drafting early in draft too and you miss on those elite running backs and you go elite wide receiver, like, you're able to stack an elite receiver in round 1 and maybe even in round 2, and then get Chase Brown and Breece all on the same team. I think as we get closer to peak draft season, probably tougher to do that round 3, round 4, but definitely round 2 and round 3, you're going to be able to get Chase Brown and Breece Hall if you wanted to get both of them, which feels like a pretty compelling draft strategy with the tier of running backs we were just discussing. I do just want to touch on Taj Brooks quickly because we don't have much of a projection for him right now since he's a rookie. Zach Moss is supposedly coming back from the injury. They did sign Perine. But I do think Taj Brooks is a somewhat exciting prospect to keep an eye on. He's been a 0 running back target for me in the last round of drafts. He's going to be available in the last round of every single fantasy football draft. He was a 6th round pick out of Texas Tech, over 60th percentile receiving production. And to me, I'm not going to be surprised at all if he's the best goal line back on the team. So I think there's multiple paths to a role for him. And he's the type of player, if injuries break right, he could be in a workhorse role on pass downs and early downs and goal line stuff. So definitely a long-term ceiling there. 6th round pick. I got the rookie fever, obviously, but just want to touch on Taj Brooks before we jump to probably the best wide receiver room in the NFL.
Yeah, I would agree. It is the best wide receiver room in the NFL. You have Jamar Chase, guys. Is anybody not taking Jamar Chase with I guess top 2 pick?
He's number 1 for me. I'm not gonna overthink it. I'm just locking him in, especially with the RBs you can get. We just talked about 2-3 turn. I'm happy to lock in Jamar Chase number 1.
Yeah, honestly, I'm pretty back and forth on who should be the first overall pick in drafts between Jamar, Bijan, and Saquon. But yeah, clearly the wide receiver 1. I think a very good argument to take him first overall. He's been the first overall pick on Underdog basically all summer. That hasn't moved at all, and he like it's him or Justin Jefferson to most people. I know we have Lamb slightly ahead of Jefferson, and I think Lamb's maybe even a more comparable situation to Chase with the team environments and quarterbacks. But yeah, just a way sturdier team environment and quarterback situation for Chase than for Jefferson. So yeah, I'm comfortable taking him first overall. It's tough for me to pass on Saquon and Bijan though, with the running back cliff that is in drafts around like round 3 or 4. And a lot of my drafts skew so running back heavy too that I do like the mid round receivers over the mid round running backs. That's my only hesitation with going Chase first, but very, very reasonable thing to do for sure with a first or second overall pick.
Yeah. And even if Jamar Chase, or even if Joe Burrow does take that step back, let's say in passing touchdowns, both of these wide receivers still weren't reliant on that. Jamar Chase, 13% touchdown rate. T. Higgins, 14% touchdown rate. So when we get to T. Higgins finishing as the wide receiver 3 last year while missing games, now going right outside the top 10 wide receivers. Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm excited to talk T. Higgins with you guys. We're really ahead on him in the WalterPicks app projections. We are actually, so T. Higgins last year, 14.5% touchdown rate. That's an elite number, top 20 in the NFL. Jamar Chase, Avery just mentioned, 13.7% touchdown rate. We have both these guys projected for a 9.4% touchdown rate in the WalterPicks app projections right now. So 5% under for T. Higgins and about that for Jamar Chase too, and they're still projecting as wide receiver 1, and we have T. Higgins at wide receiver 11 right now. I mean, both top 12 wide receivers, and I just pulled up a comparison of the two in the draft tool. The thing that I just can't stop drafting T. Higgins when I compare these two guys, like they're just so much closer than I think people realize. Jamar Chase, as we were just discussing, pretty much the solidified first overall pick or first wide receiver for sure. Top 3 pick in every single draft. T. Higgins, less than 1 target under him per game last season. Their target shares were within 1.5%. Receptions per game within 1. The routes per game, obviously pretty comparable. Jamar Chase averaged 12 more receiving yards per game, a bit more yards per reception, like a bit more efficient. But in terms of air yards, T. Higgins actually had the advantage there. He had 3% more of the air yards on the team last season. His touchdown rate was higher. If Jamar Chase goes down, is T. Higgins a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy? He probably is. And even with Jamar Chase healthy every single week, T. Higgins can finish as a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy. Really like him in best ball. I'm warming up to him more and more in season long too. I think you're sort of getting a discount Jamar Chase like 2-3 rounds later. So yeah, I'm very in on T. Higgins, and there's such a steep cliff after these two guys. And we have Jamar Chase right now projected for a 31% target share. T. Higgins projected for a 25% target share. But last season, I mean, it was closer than that. It was 28% for Chase, 27% for Higgins. So, I mean, we're being a little bit more optimistic on Chase to get in line with ADP here a little bit, but it wouldn't be crazy for T. Higgins to have a higher target share over the course of a season than Jamar Chase. They've been really close in the past. So yeah, I'm all in on getting a discount Jamar Chase in round 3. He's available like pretty consistently. You know, everything about his profile shows that he should be a round 2 wide receiver pick. And sometimes I've seen him slide as far as round 4 on some platforms. I do think there's a pretty big variance in his cost across the platforms. Sleeper has him at, and Underdog have him at wide receiver 14. But yeah, I've seen him go really late. So yeah, I'm very, very in on T. Higgins, probably even more compelled to take him at his cost than even Jamar Chase at his. Like I was just talking, really tough to pass on Bijan and Saquon for me. A lot easier, especially he's going after this sort of running back teardrop where Chase Brown's gone, Breece Hall is gone. T. Higgins sometimes still on the board. Like that's so obvious to me at that point of the draft that I should be going receiver there instead of, running backs and pushing up, Kyron Williams or those types that I'm a little bit more nervous about. But yeah, curious what Seth thinks on T. Higgins if you guys are as bullish as me and in the WalterPicks app too.
Yeah, I am really glad I have T Higgins on my dynasty team because that is just like it's magic because I love him this year. I love the target share. You look at this Bengals defense as we mentioned, it may be worse. Hendrickson holding out. Shamar Stewart, he's in Texas working out with Texas A&M. I guess he's working out on his own, but he's working out at the university. This defense is going to be terrible, so the volume is going to be there. And when you look at the other wide receivers, even in the area, like I see Tyreek Hill, JSN, I like T. Higgins better. You look at the volume that he's going to get, it's up there with those type of players, but the efficiency in the Bengals offense, he's getting covered by how do you cover this team? How you can't cover Jamar, you have to double Jamar Chase. Well, that means T. Higgins, like we said, maybe a top 12 wide receiver in the league. The only reason he's not up there is because he doesn't have his own team. He's getting the a cornerback too. He's getting no attention, and they got Chase Brown to worry about underneath. So I definitely am drafting T. Higgins pretty much every single draft. I can get him as long as I don't already have Chase Brown and Jamar Chase. I don't know if I want all three, but he's definitely a player I draft all the time in pretty much every draft I'm in.
You with us on this, Avery?
I'm with you on this. I think from just a mind frame perspective, it might feel a little bit weird clicking the draft button on a wide receiver 2, technically in round 2 and 3, depending on what site you go through. But with the sheer passing volume, we've seen T. Higgins be efficient next to Jamar Chase before. You really can't treat him as a wide receiver 2. So I am
Yeah,
with
and
you.
you said at the top, and I think it bears repeating. This is like every time I see this, I just reconfirm my take. He was wide receiver 3 in points per game last year, 19.3 points per game. This is one of these injury discounts, like a subtle, sneaky injury discount from last season. It's happening to a bunch of the receivers that were injured. T. Higgins fully healthy now, by the way. He came back, only missed 3 games last year. But people look at the season long finishes, and he's not obviously in the top 3 there because he missed I think he missed actually 5 games. He missed the first 2 games of the season, and then he missed week 8, 9, and 10 with injury, and then came back from there. So I think a really sneaky performance from him last year. He also week 17, if you were in the fantasy finals and you had T. Higgins, you won against the Denver Broncos, 41 fantasy points. Similar to what Seth was just talking about. Like going up against the Broncos, in most cases, your best receivers, you're really scared going up against Pat Surtain and the Broncos. Well, not T. Higgins, because Surtain can only cover one guy at a time. And there's really no matchup that is too scary for this passing attack. Just want to read this note from Trevor, our lead data scientist on the WalterPicks team, on the Bengals team level assumptions. We're projecting them 1 less play per game. We're projecting them 1 less pass attempt per game because it was just such crazy volume last year. But they had the highest pass rate over expectation in the NFL last year. Nothing has changed from the coaching or personnel standpoint. Assuming Burrow stays healthy, it's wheels up for this passing offense. They're probably going to lead the NFL in passing volume and passing production. In terms of the overall volume. The only other receiver I just want to touch on, technically Yoshivas is projected as wide receiver 3, and he was in that role last year. Jermaine Burton is still on the team, and I feel like that is at least just worth noting quickly because he was a pretty intriguing prospect. He was graded as a round 1 or round 2 wide receiver before the draft, talent wise, by most analysts and NFL teams. He fell to round 3 because of the character concerns, the off the field concerns, and a lot of that surfaced in his first season. But it feels notable that he's still on the team. He was missed late to meetings, missed meetings. He was benched a few games, didn't even suit up. But clearly, they've seen enough talent to keep him around. He feels like one of these guys where if Chase or Higgins were to go down, and Jermaine Burton does have enough talent to sort of get through sort of different standards than every other player on the team, like he's probably the replacement for one of these guys and the type of player that he can be on the outside. He might not make the team also if he continues to struggle with the off the field stuff, but like any other average NFL player, they would have been cut with just the off the field stuff that Jermaine Burton was doing. So it feels just noteworthy. We haven't projected under 1 point per game right now in the WalterPicks app, but he's one of these guys. Usually the backup receivers don't really benefit too much, as much as the backup running backs from injuries. But Burton might become like a real fantasy asset in the event that T. Higgins or Jamar Chase goes down. You guys want to touch on the tight ends quick?
Yeah, considering not much has changed with this offense, Mike Gesicki is still here at the tight end. 7.9 fantasy points last year, finished as the tight end 19. He's going a bit lower in drafts now, outside the top 20. But I will go back to the point that I was making in the beginning of the video. When T. Higgins is healthy, if you isolate those games in comparison, Mike Gesicki averages significantly less targets, 7.2 targets per game when T. Higgins is out, 4 targets per game when T. Higgins is healthy. Now you can take that for what it is. That's a very big difference. Mike Gesicki just signed a 3-year, $25 million deal. That's not nothing. When you look at his ADP, he's going around guys like Hunter Henry, Cade Otton, Chigakonkwo, guys that aren't necessarily proven a ton. But I'm curious, Sam, to see what you think on the tight end room in general and Mike Gesicki here.
Yeah, but I was just wish casting a Jermaine Burton sort of handcuff ceiling, and the reality is it's just Mike Gesicki. At least that's what it was last year. He's the one that really sort of stepped up as the next receiver, and he really is a pure receiving tight end. Never been much of a blocking tight end. He's going undrafted in most season long fantasy leagues. I have not been getting much of him because he's going before Zach Ertz, who I prefer by a lot. And I usually clicking on tight end like a little bit earlier than this range when I punt. Brenton Strange, so the last guy on my list that I feel decent walking into the season with, and then I'll play the waiver wire game from there. So yeah, I'm pretty out on Gesicki just with some of the other tight ends available in that range. He's going to need an injury to be relevant, and that's not what I'm looking for with my late round tight ends. You don't need to draft guys that need injuries to be relevant in this range of drafts with Ertz, Hunter Henry, Brenton Strange, even Kyle Pitts. Dare I say his name? I think I'd prefer over Gesicki. They're going pretty close in drafts, which is pretty telling. And yeah, so yeah, I'm pretty out on Gesicki for fantasy, but he probably is the biggest benefactor. Definitely that was the case last season if one of these receivers goes down.
So going into a quick draft or pass with these players, starting out with Joe Burrow, I'm more on the neutral side. Depends where you get him in ADPs. Again, round 3, 4, I'm not too with it. I think he's fine, but I'm not pressing the draft button every chance I get. Sam, where is he for you?
Easy pass for me at this range of drafts. Take the elite running backs or more likely elite receivers going in this range. Wait on quarterback. There's very likely you can get a quarterback close to this production 7 rounds later in draft. So easy pass for me.
And I'm a draft if he falls. Maybe everybody falls into that category, but I do like him if I've got the first pick and I can get him in round 5 with Jamar Chase stack.
And looking at Chase Brown, he's a draft for me. I have him above what most people and draft sites have for ADP. I think the receiving volume is elite. If you're in a non-PPR league, don't agree with that. But Sam, what do you think here?
Yeah, my gut is pass because I like Brees Hall more, and I do think it's getting a little bit overlooked how dramatic of a potential environmental backfield change, like the environment of the backfield change here is from literally there was no other running back on the team. Basically, this whole elite stretch for Chase Brown was not coming off the field. They bring back P. Ryan. Zach Moss is healthy now. They draft Taj Brooks, who I liked a little bit. So I think there's more of a crowded backfield. I'm hesitant to say like full pass as confident as it was with Joe Burrow though, because there is receiving upside on an elite offense. So not a do not draft for me. If he falls into round 3, then I'll probably be taking him there. Late round 2 is more likely where he's going to go. But yeah, I'm gonna commit to my pass though because I do prefer Brees Hall over Chase Brown.
This one's a draft for me. I think Chase Brown has just this incredible upside that he's bringing to the table. And maybe he does share that backfield a little bit more this year, but even with that, I think the volume will be there for him. And it really depends on who you take in round 1. How do you want to build your team? I think going like a elite running back or one of those elite wide receivers and Chase Brown round 2, great way to start your draft.
And then we look at the wide receivers. I won't spend too much time on this. I think we're all in agreement that we are drafting Jamar Chase. We are drafting T. Higgins. We look down at the tight end, Mike Gesicki. I have not been a believer because of the discrepancy of targets with and without T. Higgins when he was there. I'm not drafting Mike Gesicki. Sam, I'll pass it off to you. Is he one of the guys that you're going to take the click on?
No, firm pass for me with Gesicki and the other tight ends available there.
Seth?
It is also a pass for me, but there is something fun about the stats that you mentioned where if you do have T. Higgins, he could be kind of a fun like handcuff option for you. Only if you have a deeper bench, just because he does have maybe some decent upside if there was an injury. But overall, pass for me.
Yep. And when you look at this offense, everybody is available if somebody gets injured because of the pass volume. But that's going to kick it off and end this video for the Bengals review for fantasy football. If you guys do enjoy this content, make sure to be subscribed to continue to get the rest of the divisions and the rest of the teams. And we will see you guys in the next one.